This is Rogers TV.
Welcome to An Hour to Give. I'm Sam Laprade. This week is all about Beechwood Cemetery, but with a little bit of a twist, and an important one at that. Nick McCarthy joins me now. Hello, Nick. How are you?
I'm excellent. How are you?
Nick, you have a really cool job. Tell us what you do.
So, I have a really unique role in the industry, in the bereavement sector. I'm the Director of Marketing, Communications, and Community Outreach, so I get to do a lot of different things, really focusing on community and how we can give back and how we can reach out and make people feel welcomed at their National Military Cemetery, but also make people feel seen at the National Military Cemetery, the National Cemetery Canada.
And, you know, it's such a, as you mentioned, it's a very unique property as well. It's beautiful. You invite the community in so many different ways. We're going to talk about the main reason why you're here today, but talk about how you invite the community in and really make it Canada's cemetery.
So what's neat is we have such a diverse group of people buried at Beechwood. So we can do these wonderful themed tours from sports to baseball to Stanley Cup. Today we had a group of students come in again for tours. But what we do is we allow the community different opportunities, from Chamber Fest to adaptive concerts that we hold in our sacred space, again partnered with Chamberfest for youth with neurodivergencies, to fundraisers and events like celebrating the Pearlies successful campaign.
Yeah, it was very successful.
Exactly, where you were the MC. But again, it gives us the opportunity to say, hey, we're here for the community. We've been around 151 years this year. So it's really a wonderful place to sort of be part of. And all these different groups and these activities that we do essentially create a sense of connection and a sense of community ownership to us.
Mm-hmm, for sure. You do a lot around Remembrance Day. I got a very interesting note today about preparing those headstones for Remembrance Day as well. I mean, you really do embrace the community.
We, when it comes to Remembrance Day, it's probably as busy as this time of year for us. But we're starting a little earlier this year with Remembrance Day with headstone cleaning. So that's on Saturday the 29th, and then again October the 20th. And we're having people come out and learn how to clean headstones and work with the military, work with us, and really ensure that every single moment, every single headstone for Remembrance Day is clean and ready to be seen by the families.
Wow, it's beautiful.
Try.
You've done something that I think is in many ways, you've been a leader in terms of truth and reconciliation. So talk to me about the partnership, not only with the First Nations Sharing and Caring Society, but also with ACG.
A7G?
A7G.
Yeah. So what we've been able to do is we've had really good communication, really good moments of dialogue, and really good partnerships. And the Short Form Caring Society, it was really a grassroots development of this program. But when you have somebody of the stature of Cindy Blackstock come to Beechwood, and it was prior to the release of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's report, where we see ourselves challenged and sort of asked to sort of talk about reconciliation and Canadian history and reconciliation in a meaningful way. So Beechwood in the 1990s, we set up these great Canadian plaques. There are these green plaques all across the property that have sort of stories of individuals that are buried there. And Dr. Duncan Campbell Scott had a plaque like this. And it was written in the very old style, right? Very colonial, very not inclusive to the reality of the Indigenous population. So it was all about being a poet, a prose writer, and a great civil servant. And as we learn, he was a civil servant for almost 40 years, and he was in charge of the then superintendent of Indian Affairs and the superintendent of the residential school program. So we know for a fact. So Dr. Blackstock came to Beechwood, and she was ready, as she explains it in often, that she was ready to have an argument and really sort of bring the facts. And she armed herself with facts and figures, as one would do. My then president addressed her, and together they decided to really focus on removing the plaque and work together to build something new. Mm-hmm. And this is how the Reconciling History program was born. She actually didn't believe he was going to do it and came back the next day, and the plaque was done. And a lot of Beechwood's narrative is like this, where we're going going to work with community. We're going to make sure that the community feels safe and protected by us. And it goes all the way back to the early 1900s with the building of a Chinese Buddhist cemetery for a community that was under the head tax.
Wow. I mean, it really is fascinating. And you've taken the relationship with Dr. Blackstock really to a new level. Every year you seem to do more and more. This year is a very special year, of course, September 30th, National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. How will Beechwood be recognizing this important day?
So it's a wonderful partnership, right? You can imagine that we're always trying to think of doing something different. This year, the Caring Society released a new film, and it's a film about the story of Beechwood. So we're going to be inviting students up until I think 2 o'clock. All the schools have registered. Yellow buses are going to come, and they're going to see this film. They're going to have a chance to talk to the students. They're going to have a chance to talk to the Bryce family, and then go see Peter Henderson Bryce's grave, which again is that whistleblower, that important contemporary person that was defending Indigenous children. And they're going to be able to either paint stones or write letters to him. And again, that's another program that we have. And then after 2 o'clock at 2:15, we'll have our regular, our wonderful ceremony at the Children's Sacred Garden, and then more public tours for the general public.
Let's pause and talk about Mr. Bryce for a second, because I think it really is a story that deserves some time with us today. Walk us through his story.
So Peter Henderson Bryce is a forgotten hero in Canadian society. He was, I would say, he was almost disappeared. He was a person, he was the public health, the doctor for public health for Ontario. And then he was the public health doctor for the Ministry of the Interior and then the Ministry of then Indian Affairs. And Dr. Bryce was tasked with finding out what was going on in the residential schools and seeing why the mortality rates were so high. And we know for a fact that it was safer for a frontline soldier in World War I to go to that than a child to go to residential school. So there was a bigger chance of them being able to come home as a frontline soldier than an Indigenous child in residential school. So he started writing these reports and presenting them to Duncan Campbell Scott, who he was a member of the same community. They knew each other. They would have gone to the same church. They would have known the same influential people, and kept presenting these reports. And every year he'd present a report. Every year Duncan Campbell Scott would just pretty much say the status of the Indigenous people are good, and completely ignore the recommendation, ignore everything that was being said. So flash forward to 1922, they find sort of a way to kick him out of the public service, and it was on a technicality that he was working for 2 departments, right? Really a small, minute item to sort of boot him out of the public service. He then goes downtown to Spark Street and self-publishes a national crime. And it's this pamphlet that's an indictment of the residential school system. But it also has recommendations that for us is common sense, right? Keeping sick children away from healthy children, making sure there's fresh air, fresh water, clean food, clean clothing, delicing. A lot of the stuff that during the pandemic everyone sort of did as well. So there's a lot of parallels in that sense. But he was disappeared, and he ends up leaving Ottawa in the 1920s to go to Toronto, and he's forgotten throughout history. So as flash forward to 2014, 2015, and the Truth and Reconciliation Commission comes out, and we look at the role of Duncan Campbell Scott, we look at the role of Nicholas Flood Davin, we look at the role of federal government, we look at the role of the churches, we look at the role of all these different individuals who had a very negative impact on Indigenous children and Indigenous communities. But we needed to find somebody who was this champion, and this historian called John Malloy ended up writing this wonderful book about a national crime. And it really highlighted the role that Peter Henderson Bryce had within the community, and how there's this almost one soul light at the end of this dark tunnel at the time, where he's speaking about protecting these children and making sure that we can do something to make a difference, right? So I think that's the legacy that we're able to bring.
Wow. And I love that you have children do an actual activity to recognize him. And I'm hoping that history then does remember him.
What's interesting is they've made documentaries about them. There's been a lot of articles. So I think in the last few years, we've seen more people talk about Peter Henderson Bryce. And for a man who essentially humbly believed that his life was a failure, that his professional life was that he didn't get to do what he needed to do to protect everyone. It's quite humbling to know now that people are talking about him, people are remembering him, and he's one of these figures that are contemporary. Oftentimes when we're talking about this, we get confronted with, oh, well, that's just the way it was, right? Everybody thought that way. And finding these people like him, like Diamond Jeunesse, like a Supreme Court justice who created Aboriginal courts, the Aboriginal court system in the 1940s, we have these contemporary voices of the period who are saying, no, 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 this isn't right. They're calling it out, and they're risking everything, including their professional careers, to call it out and say this isn't right.
Wow, pretty brave.
I would hope so. Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah, it's incredible. The collaboration that you have, we're going to be speaking with a couple of people today and having that opportunity to connect. You're going to come back and chat with us as well. But the collaboration from Beechwood, I just see that you're really trying to collaborate with lots of different people, and this is just one example.
I think this is probably the strongest collaboration. I think it's something that's so near and dear to our hearts, and even the building itself has Indigenous elements to it well before this program was ever put in place. So we look at how can we properly work with a caring society, how can we enable a 7G to come in and having the youth tell the stories of the community. And you can imagine how hard that must be to talk about figures who didn't want them to survive, didn't want them to exist. And these strong youth are sharing these stories with everyday Canadians. But again, it's this partnership that keeps growing organically, and every year we try to do something different. Some years we take on a little more than we should, like when we had to lay down 57 small tiles across our sacred space to create a memory labyrinth. But it's something that we look forward to thinking of how we can do it, and hopefully one day we'll not have to hold this day, and it can be a day of reflection for Canadians from coast to coast.
How can people learn more about not only what you're doing on September 30th, but what you're doing all year round? Are we heading to the website, Nick?
Yeah, of course, we're going to head to the website or Instagram or Facebook. Everything's up and available, and we encourage people to take a look, but I also encourage people to take a look at our blog. We have a lot of stories about everyday Canadians who have these incredible tales to share, and then we've got some death literacy pieces too that people aren't really comfortable speaking about dying and death. So we want to really sort of have people understand that they can educate themselves, much like we do with finances, which nobody wants to talk about either.
True.
But death is that one thing that we can't run away from. But again, we encourage people to come.
Amazing. Well, you're going to come back,
Yes.
which I'm so glad. Nick McCarthy, of course, joining us from Beechwood. This is an hour to give. Come on back.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
Unscripted, uninterrupted coverage of events by Canada's business leaders, visionaries, and social figures. Watch Podium exclusively on Rogers TV.
Get front row seats to Music and Beyond's unforgettable summer festival. Experience world-class concerts, mesmerizing performances, and much more. Music and Beyond presents a new season on Rogers TV.
Join us Monday to Friday on Daytime Ottawa as we showcase some of the fabulous things that are happening in your city. We'll showcase some local businesses. We'll also have a little bit of fun with food and fashion. We'll talk a little health and wellness, and we'll share some of those inspirational stories of some of those local people that are doing absolutely amazing things. Tune in at 2 p.m. live Monday to Friday with repeats at 6 and 11 p.m.
Think it's okay to drive high? Think again. Drug-impaired driving is as illegal as drunk driving, and in Ontario, the penalties are the same. If police suspect you're driving under the influence of drugs of any kind, or a combination of drugs and alcohol, and you fail a roadside test, your license will be suspended immediately for up to 30 days. You'll pay a penalty of $198. And you can be charged with a criminal offense of impaired driving, the same as alcohol. Driving high is never okay.
And we are back on An Hour to Give. Today is all about Beechwood Cemetery and a very important collaboration that they have with First Nations Caring Society. And the one and only Jennifer King is joining me now. Hi, Jennifer. How are you?
Hi, Sam. Thanks for having me.
I'm so happy you're here. And you brought friends.
I did bring friends.
So tell us who you brought.
I brought with me today Spirit Bear, and Spirit Bear's mom, Mary the Bear.
I love it.
Yeah.
So let's just start right here, because I promised there was going to be guests, one speaking, two not speaking. But I think it's really important that we share the story of Spirit Bear.
Yeah. So Sam, as your guest may know, the First Nations Child and Family Caring Society, of which I am honored to work, has a long-standing human rights complaint against the Government of Canada filed in 2007 with the Assembly of First Nations. And that human rights complaint said that the Government of Canada was racially discriminating against First Nations children in their underfunding of child welfare and just really failure to make sure that First Nations kids were getting the services and the supports they needed. So as I said, that was 2007. That's a while ago now. And Canada really fought quite hard to stop that case from being heard. And those were some difficult times for us at the Caring Society, wondering how was this going to turn out. And it was during that period that a colleague, Mary T.G. from Carrier-Secony Family Services up in Prince George, gave this little bear to my executive director, Cindy Blackstock. And she gave Cindy this bear to remind everybody involved with the case that we were working for children. Because nothing really reminds you of children quite like a teddy bear, right? So Cindy started bringing this bear to all the hearings. That's not something that usually happens in Canadian Human Rights Tribunal proceedings, but she brought this bear. And over time, people started to recognize her, as the lady with the bear, and he was eventually gifted his ribbon shirt and his moccasins, his medallion. He even now has a pin that was given to him by Senator Murray Sinclair, who your viewers will know was the head of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Now, about that case, in 2016, the tribunal substantiated the complaint, and they said, yes, Canada, you are discriminating against First Nations kids, and ordered Canada to stop the discrimination and make sure it didn't happen again. Now, by this time, Spirit Bear had developed, his name and his personality, and we at the Caring Society know that it's really important to engage youth and children. And so with this case, it affects kids, right? It's First Nations kids who are suffering this discrimination, and their peers have a right to know about the kind of country that they're growing up in. And so Cindy had the idea to use Spirit Bear to create a series of children's books, and she wrote that first book. We self-published it at the Caring Society. We bought like 1,000 copies, and I remember her saying like, "Oh my gosh, this is a big thing that we're trying." She was worried we're going to have these books collecting dust for years to come. They sold out after that first book. 3 more were published, and they really are a way of connecting with a younger audience about truth and reconciliation, about the history of Canada, about the things that we need to do today if we want to be a country that values human rights.
It is such a remarkable story because, and then there's a film.
And then there's films.
Right,
so,
it doesn't stop,
our executive director, Cindy Blackstock, for those who don't know, is a bit of a powerhouse, and she has an idea and she runs with it. So, she wrote the books and she said, I really think that we need a film. And she is quite partial to stop motion animation, puppets. And she got connected with an Indigenous studio out of Vancouver called Spotted Fawn Productions. It's Indigenous led by an amazing Michif artist named Amanda Strong. And they created a stop motion film for us. And then they did 2, and then we did 3, and then we did 4. And we were pretty naive in the early days. We did not understand everything that goes into making a stop motion film. Yeah. But over the years, we found our rhythm, so much so that earlier this year, June, we launched a museum exhibit called Spirit Bear and Children Make History up in Prince George, so Spirit Bear's home territory. Showcasing the sets and the puppets from those films and some of the archival items that go along with those stories. So T-shirts, for example, that were made by youth who attended those tribunal hearings back in the years of 2007 to 2016. And we have all sorts of little pieces, including pieces about Dr. Peter Henderson Bryce, who is, of course, buried at Beechwood Cemetery and is an important figure in learning about residential schools.
Very important. I mean, these tools to help educate. I have told Dr. Blackstock on many occasions, she's been so graceful with me over the years, because I'm a little bit nervous sometimes. I'm always afraid I'm gonna say something and it's not gonna be, you know, in the context that it's meant. I'm trying to learn myself. She has been nothing but graceful. But I think a tool like this, and I've shared with her many, many times, I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed that I'm 53 years old. I learned about most of this in 2021. The education system did me no good in terms of really knowing what was happening in this country. I was 25 years old when the last residential school was closed. That is not that long ago. I mean, I joke about my age, but that's not that long ago, really, right?
No, it's not. And, you know, I'm in my 40s, and, you know, I had people in my circle who went to residential schools in the prairies, right? Okay. So this is a very recent piece, and whether you have someone in your circle who went to residential school, or you have someone in your family, or you are a descendant of somebody, this system impacted every Indigenous person, every First Nations, Inuit, and Métis person in this country.
And the reason I sort of share all that is because I think a lot of Canadians are like me, and they want our children to learn, and what a beautiful way to learn, right? About really horrible things that have taken place, but it's at the level that they can understand.
One thing that has really become apparent through doing the books and the films is that there are ways to talk about this history and these contemporary realities in ways that are child-friendly, right? You can absolutely do that in a way that is age-appropriate and respectful, and prevents kids from growing up and having this sort of like shock in high school when, you know, luckily now people are learning about residential schools in high school. But the high school students that I've met over the years, you know, the main message that I got was, I wish I had known this sooner. I wish I had been taught when I was younger, that kids can learn about this, that kids want to do, to learn about this. And, you know, something that you've probably heard Cindy say is that kids are experts in love and fairness, right? And so that's kind of the message that has guided us as we do this work, is that you know, kids want to know, and more importantly, they want to do something about it. And I think most parents want, and caregivers, they don't want their kids to go through the same sort of, you know, shock and horror that you described, right?
Yeah, 100%. Now, tell me about Spirit Bear's mom, Mary.
So this is Mary the Bear, and Mary is named for Mary T.G., who gave Spirit Bear to Cindy. And through the book, Cindy has created a whole world of Spirit Bear, you know, so where he grew up, what his mom does. If you read the books or watch the films, you're going to meet other characters. Uncle Huckleberry is one of my favorites. And the really cool thing, well, there's lots of cool things, but one of the things that I like to mention is that all of the voice actors in the films are either adults who've had some kind of connection to the case, or kids themselves. So if you were to watch the fourth film, it is actually about Dr. Bryce and Beechwood Cemetery and reconciling history. And the voice of one of the characters is the son of a Beechwood staff member.
Wow, I love that.
Yeah, and he did such a great job.
I love that. It's amazing. And, you know, this is an opportunity for us to talk today about the collaboration between Beechwood and A7G and the Caring Society. This is a beautiful sort of three-way partnership here.
It is.
Nick's going to join us in a few minutes, but talk to me a little bit about this partnership and how important it is.
Yeah, so for viewers who don't know, A7G stands for Assembly of Seven Generations, and it is a youth collective here in Ottawa on unceded, unsurrendered Algonquin territory. And I don't want to, speak for them in describing their organization, but I think what I can say is they do a lot of work in just giving youth in the urban context connections and cultural opportunities. They are also wicked smart, and they write a lot of reports. They have a program whereby youth-serving organizations can actually have them come in and audit what they do and say, like, hey, we're actual youth. Let us take a look at what you do and tell you if you could maybe be doing it better from a youth perspective. They've been to the United Nations to talk about youth rights there. And we're just really lucky to connect with them. And so when the idea for reconciling history and tours at Beechwood came about, Cindy thought, we should ask the youth if they're interested in being part of these tours and conveying this history to Canadians. And, I'll be honest, I sort of thought, do Indigenous youth really want to spend, for example, Orange Shirt Day or the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, educating Canadians about a history that's very dark and personal for us, right? I was surprised because they did. And I think that it is unfortunate that we're still at a time where we have to have First Nations and Inuit and Métis young people teaching this history, but for now it does give us a way to be in control and make sure that what's being told is truthful.
It's incredible.
Right?
You're going to come back with me. I'm so happy. And Nick McCarthy's going to join us. Is Spirit Bear and his mom staying?
Yeah, I don't think they would let me.
No, they're going to stay with us.
No.
Perfect. Come back to An Hour to Give.
My name is Matthew Rutledge. I'm a 60 Scoop survivor, born in Red Lake. Was adopted from there to Toronto at the age of 4. A lot of our brothers and sisters, family members got separated from each other. That was the government's goal, to break that connection from brothers and sisters. Basically taking the Indian out of the child. Right now, they're still trying to find themselves. Originally, my birth name is Harvey Halverson. In my high school days, teens, I was trying to fit into society. I knew I was First Nations, but I didn't know who I was inside. I think later in life, I started that journey. I am proud, Nishnawbe man, of who I am now. I love life, who I am.
Join us Monday to Friday on Daytime Ottawa as we showcase some of the fabulous things that are happening in your city. We'll showcase some local businesses. We'll also have a little bit of fun with food and fashion. We'll talk a little health and wellness, and we'll share some of those inspirational stories of some of those local people that are doing absolutely amazing things. Tune in at 2 p.m. live Monday to Friday with repeats at 6 and 11 p.m.
Kids these days, people say we lack initiative.
And technology, that we're all addicted.
Kids these days, we hear that we only care about ourselves. Apparently, we're lazy.
And don't seem to have any sense of independence.
Actually, kids these days are facing a lot. Because the world has changed, and so have our health issues. Kids these days, we could really use your help. Join CHIO in our biggest fundraising campaign ever to transform pediatric care.
We're so glad you stayed with us here on An Hour to Give. I'm Sam Laprade. Today is all about Beechwood Cemetery and this incredible collaboration with the Caring Society and A7G. Jennifer King is back with us, and Nick McCarthy. Jennifer King, of course, representing the Caring Society. Nick McCarthy representing Beechwood. You two have really gotten to know each other over the years, right? Yeah. You're working together, yes.
Yeah, and we implement a lot of interesting things together. And,
yes.
And enlarging projects and figuring out how to make things work. But
yes.
It's a fun partnership, right? And you can imagine, at no point in my career did I think there was going to be a children's book written about a cemetery.
Right.
So just off the bat, right, I thought that was kind of a really interesting piece.
Right,
but
well, at no point in my career did I think I would be spending this much time at a cemetery.
Right, that's
so there
true.
we go.
Yeah,
That's true. I love it. So let's talk about this book because it's really fantastic. I'm holding up a copy here for our viewers, and this is a really wonderful collaboration. So talk to me a little bit about this, Jennifer.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, Cindy Blackstock, our executive director, has written a series of children's books. There's 4 in the series. This is number 4, and also as we were talking about, the purpose of the books is to engage kids in topics that are really important and that also adults might not know how to broach or might even think that this isn't something we can talk to kids about. So in this book, Cindy goes into the story of the statue of John A. Macdonald coming down in Victoria, BC. And she does it through the eyes of Spirit Bear and his family who are going on vacation. And so I won't spoil, exactly what happens, but it does a segue into saying, okay, if we're talking about what to do with these historical figures who have had a role in colonization and who have had a role in residential school, what can we do? Let's talk about what they've done at Beechwood Cemetery. And that segues into the story of Dr. Bryce.
And I think what makes it so unique, and it makes the relationship so unique, is we're a private business and a not-for-profit organization, advocacy group that are working together, and we're taking the same path together to build something, right? And oftentimes both groups get calls from around the world about people looking to do similar things. How to deal with genocidal practices, how to deal with those dark moments in history. So it's quite a unique way to do it. And the book itself is a wonderful example of how you can teach youth. But what we've noticed too is schools have wanted to come in earlier. So in the Ontario curriculum right now, 5-6 grade, so 10, 11-year-olds, are actually learning about residential schools and the impacts of residential schools. So throughout the last month or the last few weeks, I've had French schools come in on a regular basis, and they're learning the material. And it's exactly like Jennifer said in the last segment, how hungry these kids are to know, and how they're not afraid to ask the questions, how they want to understand what happened in their country and how they cannot repeat it.
Bingo. I think that's a really important point. Talk to me about the fox character.
Do you want to start?
Do you want to talk about the fox?
Well, we have one of our main children's symbols at Beechwood is the fox, right? So any child that's at a funeral at Beechwood, we hand them a sympathy fox, right? And it's something they can hold, and it's something they can touch. And it was developed by one of our own staff members. She drew it, they got it done, and then the Caring Society all fell in love with it because, of course, we given them the fox, and then we've made cookies and with Spirit Bear and the fox on them, all kinds of different. But this fox is definitely unique on the book itself, and he's quite impressive in my opinion as well.
Yeah, so as it says on the front, and Cindy always does this, based on a true story, right? And so she takes elements of things that are in fact, part of our everyday life, like the fox at Beechwood, and made Echo the fox a character in this story. And this is the character that I mentioned in our last conversation that was voiced by the son of a staff member at Beechwood.
It's, just another example of how you're all working together. Where can we find the book, Jennifer, if we're wanting to get it for our own children?
You can find it wherever books are sold, as they say.
Fantastic.
So, personally, I would say check out your local bookstore. They can order it, but for folks who might not have access to that, Amazon, Indigo. You can also go on our website, so fncaringsociety.com, and you can find a PDF of the story. So if you can't buy it, but you still want to read it, you can go on there and download it for free.
I love that it's accessible to all. I love that. Nick, when we think about a cemetery, we typically don't think about youth. We think about kind of it being a sad place and where we're maybe saying goodbye to a loved one. But you've really, and I've been to many things, as you know, at Beechwood, you've really created a very open space to have dialogue. Having the youth on site, I was there last year, I was inspired by them. What's it like to see youth at the cemetery?
I think for a lot of people, seeing those yellow school buses roll up, depending on where you are in your grief journey, it can be a little jarring, and we understand that. But the kids come out with a very much a high level of respect, a high level of compassion for everyone who's there, and sort of an openness that you don't see from us older adults sometimes. Most people enjoy seeing the youth because it's this breath of fresh air and an understanding that these kids are learning about Canadian history. They're learning about the true history of Canada. And be it our black marks and our not black marks, right? Being the happy moments and the sad moments. But as we bring them across the property, oftentimes they'll learn something a little different, or they'll be able to connect. And what I really enjoy at Beechwood is when we have youth, and of course Canada's a wonderfully diverse country, when they can spot themselves and see themselves and connect. And again, it goes back to what we were talking about, representation, how important that is. And I think that's what this book does for a lot of people, allows that representation, allows to be seen, but it also allows the cemetery as a whole, allows other people to see themselves.
And shout out to all the teachers, the educators who are preparing these kids to come on to Beechwood grounds. And as Nick said, very respectful. It's unique for them too, I'm sure, but very interesting and I'm sure very memorable as part of their educational journey. And also really going to show that history is everywhere, right? So, you think of Beechwood Cemetery, you wouldn't necessarily know off the top that there are some very important historical figures buried there.
But the importance is also to take that history and tie it to present day, to have that understanding. And a lot of the figures that we do, we end up on the tours that we lead, we end up talking about how there's certain conditions that we see in the Indigenous community now that are still a byproduct of that period, of the residential school period, of the 60s scoop, of the millennial scoop, of the over-incarceration and over-representation from the criminal justice system, which that was just a mouthful. But again, we're confronted this on day-to-day, so having people understand what's going on and how they themselves can do something and advocate and take small steps to either educate themselves, like you guys were talking in the last segment, but also how they can advocate for our Indigenous communities and really be a champion.
What would you say to someone, Jennifer, who maybe is like me? They're in their 50s, they did not learn this in school, they're wanting to look at resources and tools. This is obviously a wonderful place to start. But what other resources are you suggesting for us?
So I think when we talk about truth and reconciliation, of course, we have this truth piece, right? The reconciliation piece does require action. And for those who don't know, we have the Truth and Reconciliation Commission calls to action that really set out a roadmap guided by the words of survivors for what needs to happen in this country to get to this place of reconciliation. And unfortunately, very few of those Truth and Reconciliation Commission calls to action have been implemented, right? And so we sometimes hear these problems are big, we don't know what to do. Actually, there's a lot already on the books that will tell us exactly what to do. We have the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples, 1996. We had the TRC. We had the Missing and Murdered inquiry into missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, and all those calls to justice. So I would say people need to understand what has been already put forward and then push those in positions of leadership to implement those recommendations or those calls. And for example, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission calls to action have calls for every sector, right? The education sector, the business sector, sports. Media, right? So, there is something that everybody can do. And then I think the second piece is to really understand that although it might be more comfortable to say, you know, thank goodness we don't do those things anymore, we have contemporary discrimination and injustices happening in real time. So residential schools closed in 1996. We still have communities where high school youth have to leave to receive their education, either because there is no high school in their community, or the school is so under-resourced that, you know, the families are saying, well, if my kid has any hope of a higher education, they're going to have to go to a different high school. And so these are that's just one example. You know, we have...
But it's a good example.
We have water issues, right? So we learn about the past, and then we have to confront how some of those same practices have carried on today, are happening today, right? And that things might not have changed as much as we would like to think.
Wonderfully said. Yeah. Wonderfully said. I think at minimum, on September the 30th, at minimum, each and every one of us to look at the 94 recommendations. When I had a radio program, we did them. I did one a day for 94 days. And it was a big learning experience for me, and listeners really liked it because it was an opportunity to sort of digest one a day leading up until September the 30th.
I think anybody can embody them, right? Look at us. Sure. We're a 150-year-old cemetery, and we are embodying some of the recommendations. The one that really fits for us, but we're also touching on the education pieces, the youth pieces, the working together. So I think there's an opportunity for everyone, and it's good from a business perspective. It's good business to do it, right? To move forward and have an understanding that reconciliation is an everyday event.
Absolutely.
And it's an everyday walk where we're always trying to do a little bit better each day. And we're going to fail sometimes, and it happens, right? And I think people have to understand that in that failure, you're learning something.
100%.
And you can't.
We're going to come back with both of you. I'm so sorry to cut you off, but you're going to come back, which is great. Jennifer King's coming back, and Nick McCarthy, Spirit Bear, and his mom. I'm so glad. This is an hour to give. You're learning all about Beechwood Cemetery today and the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation.
Smudging is a very important part in our life as we're all learning to walk the good way. When we smudge, we use the sacred medicine, the white sage, the sweetgrass, the tobacco, and the cedar. It cleanses negative energy and replaces it by a positive energy. When I smudge, I cleanse my end and my eagle feather and start cleansing my breath to have better words. I will smudge my eyes so I could see the better things offered to me. I will smudge my ears to hear the good thing that people have to say. I will smudge my hair to have good thinking from my head. I will bring the smudge to my feet so I could walk in respect with our Mother, the Earth. Smudging is the way we give our prayers to connect our spirit to the Creator. We express gratitude for the gift of life, the learning, and growth.
Kids these days, people say we lack initiative.
And technology, that we're all addicted.
Kids these days, we hear that we only care about ourselves. Apparently, we're lazy.
And don't seem to have any sense of independence.
Actually, kids these days are facing a lot.
Because the world has changed, and so have our health issues. Kids these days, we could really use your help. Join CHIO in our biggest fundraising campaign ever to transform pediatric care.
Hi, I'm Paula Roy, and it's my pleasure to welcome you back into my kitchen for another season of Paula Roy's Favorite Foods. My approach to food is pretty straightforward. Fancy is fine, but when you're in a time crunch or have a really hungry and patient family to feed, I say simple recipes made with wholesome ingredients that you probably have on hand are the best. And that's exactly what you'll find on Paula Roy's Favorite Foods on Rogers TV.
Another opportunity to have a really important discussion today with Jennifer King from the Caring Society and Nick McCarthy from Beechwood Cemetery. This collaboration between you two, as well as A7G, which I think is a really important part today. Those youth, incredibly inspiring. You know, as I mentioned earlier, when I was there last year, them going around and being so intentional and so respectful, it gave me hope for the future.
And I want to lift them up because it's not easy to spend, September 30th being Orange Shirt Day and the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. It's not easy as an Indigenous person to spend that day, having to educate others about what was done to us, right?
It's definitely not fair, right?
And they do it every year, and they do it with grace, and they handle questions, understanding that people didn't have an opportunity to learn, and they also bring the insights from their lived experiences, right? So, when I mentioned in our previous segment about a high school youth often having to leave northern communities to get an education, some of them might know somebody who that happened to, right? Or some of them came from a northern community where there isn't clean water, or there isn't housing. And no, we don't expect them to share those life experiences, but if they want to contextualize the history with what's happening today, this is an opportunity for them to do that. So, like I said, just really want to lift them up for partnering with us and showing up. This is our 4th year.
For sure. And you're wearing an orange shirt.
I am.
And your Spirit Bear orange shirt, which is beautiful. Talk to me a little bit about Orange Shirt Day, because some people are still learning. So tell me a little bit about Orange Shirt Day.
Yeah, so September 30th is both Orange Shirt Day and the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. And Orange Shirt Day comes from the story of a woman named Phyllis Webstad, who went to residential school herself. And in preparation for going to residential school, her granny had bought her a really nice orange shirt, and she took it with her to the school. And when she arrived, it was taken from her because, of course, that sort of individuality was not permitted, amongst many other things that we know. And so later in life, as an adult, she created this day inviting people to wear these orange shirts, to know that story, to know that her story was one of many, and just to show support to survivors, to their families, and as a commitment to do better.
Yeah.
It's an easy outward symbol for all of us to wear that
For
day.
sure, and you'll agree with me, Nick, it's really grown over the years, especially over the last 4 years. 2021, of course, unfortunately, such a tragic year in our history in Canada, but you've seen it grow even with your children, right?
Well, exactly, and I think the way my children are learning about residential school versus how we learn is completely different, right? So, of course, my children have the benefit of being part of these programs as well, coming to Beechwood, but I think we have to remember, right, our children, I have a 10-year-old and a soon-to-be 13-year-old, they're the first children that did not have a residential school system in place at the same time, right? So when I was going to school, there was the residential school system where people were being taken away from their families. And it's jarring to think of that as somebody who was 10 and seeing that happen and understanding, and we learning it completely differently, right? And learning it in a way that really removes all of the culpability from the government and all the policy from the government. So again, it's nice to see that people are open. And we do confront people sometimes that aren't open to it and don't have an understanding, but they'll get there, right? And we know that we'll have to get them there at some point.
And I should add, Phyllis Webstad does have a book about Orange Shirt Day for children. The 3rd Spirit Bear book in the series touches on Phyllis's story with her consent, and there is actually an adaptation of Phyllis's story for very young ones, so ages 4 to 6.
Oh, wow.
My son is in kindergarten, he's 5, and the teacher asked me the other day, like, hey, do you have any suggestions for Orange Shirt Day? And I said, well, actually, may I interest you in this book by Phyllis Webstad? So there's, again, this is a good example of lots of resources out there for people to access.
But we also want to make sure that we're looking at resources from authentic voices. Because oftentimes people will go buy an orange shirt from one of the big box stores instead of looking at a local Indigenous provider. I think a lot of companies are essentially, I would say, orange washing. You hear that orange washing their own their companies themselves and wearing it as a badge to just say we're an ally. But I think if you're looking for authentic voices and you're looking for people who actually believe in reconciliation, then these are the people you want to support day in and day out.
So tell me how you'll spend September 30th. How will you spend this day?
Well, I'm going to be spending it with Nick.
Yes, I figured that much.
Yeah. So we will be there on September 30th, and it is a Monday this year. So this has been a nice opportunity to be able to invite some school groups in. So we're going to be spending the morning having 2 groups come in, 200 kids at each time slot. They are going to watch the Spirit Bear film, Echoes of the Past, and then they're going to have the opportunity to go down and visit Bryce's final spot and do an art piece to help them express some of what they've learned. So we're going to be doing that, and then in the afternoon the tours will be open to the public.
And this is where they can, is it color rocks and write the letters, right? So that must be really interesting to have that hands-on exercise. I always learned better when I did those kinds of things.
I think I think the handwritten notes allow kids to sort of express what's going on in their heart, right? It is hard, and like having taken kids, I think I'm at about like 1,300 kids this month already. That I've taken 5th and 6th graders, taken through this tour, and it's hard for them to express in the moment, right? And even for adults, we've noticed it's hard to express. So allowing somebody to have that sort of internal thought and write a letter is really great. And then for the younger kids, the stone painting is always good, and minus having to truck the stone up the hill. But that's a logistical problem that we always face every year. But again, you have this mailbox, and this mailbox keeps getting full, right? And as we're approaching September 11th, it overflows, and we'll empty it out. And it's all these people who are regretting not learning it sooner, or committing to learning more and picking up something, or ensuring that they're going to protect the person next to them, Indigenous or not, right?
And Bryce's story is so important in that it really cracks open that myth that people of the time just didn't know any better, right? And so, as an Indigenous person, I'm First Nations. My family comes from the Wissahickon First Nation. It's here in Ontario. Bryce is, a non-Indigenous doctor, but in hearing his story, I was like, there is the evidence that people knew. And now when, I'm confronted with somebody who thinks that the residential school system was simply a product of the time, I can say, actually, there were people at that time who knew that watching children die of tuberculosis unnecessarily was not right. No. So that for me as an Indigenous person, that's the power of Bryce's story.
Is it difficult for you on September 30th? You sort of mentioned the youth, but is it, at the end of that day, is it draining on you?
It's a long day, and I hope that one day we're going to get to a time when September 30th can be a day for First Nations, Métis, and Inuit to reflect ourselves. Right now it's like, hey, it's September 30th, and we're all working it, right? We're not there yet, but we're seeing this next generation come up. Right? So all these kids who are coming to these tours, all of these kids of all backgrounds, all ages, all diversities, they are learning this, and we're going to soon have a cohort who is really knowledgeable about history and contemporary circumstances, and that I would be, proud to sit back and watch lead these tours.
And they learn how to share. Like today, I had 40 teachers from Ottawa U Teachers College. And it's the second year in a row that a colleague, Tracy Crow, organizes this, and we have them. And we have these really heartful discussions about how to decolonize our language, how to set what happened 150 years ago and for the last 7 generations into context that is relatable today. So it really sort of focuses, so not only are we talking to the children, we're also ensuring that the next generation of educators, and it's been almost like a firecracker this year, I've noticed, where everyone wants to talk about it, everyone wants to experience it, everyone is asking different people to give presentations, and talk to people how to do reconciliation in a meaningful way.
It's really interesting to see as well how Beechwood is sort of counting the number of items on on the list, 94 recommendations. 13 of them, my understanding, have been lit on the property, and of course leaving 81 to be done. But talk to me a little bit. We only have a short period of time, but tell me a little bit about how that was done.
It was another one of our wonderful projects where we come up with an idea and then
Well, not us. It's always Dr. Blackstock who said, "Hey, could you just rig up some lights, Nick?"
But so we have 2 cedar trees that are marking the entrance to Bryce's family burial plot, and in that there are 94 light bulbs, solar lights, because we're green and there's no electricity in an old section like that. But we spray painted 13 orange to really sort of have that visual reflection, and I think it really helps. And Bryce's grave has now become a place where people visit, Indigenous and non-Indigenous people. So you see people leave stones from their territories or from their houses. You see tobacco being laid. I've been part of 3 or 4 smudging ceremonies so far this year. So again, it's a wonderful place for people to connect. And for a man who was all but forgotten and who considered himself a failure in the end, to have this as a place of reflection is unbelievable. Right?
What an incredible legacy. Incredible legacy. I've learned so much from you. Every time I spend time with you both, I learn so much. I learned so much from Dr. Blackstock as well. We literally have like 30 seconds, but tell me what you would say to Dr. Blackstock about what she's done for this country.
I think I would like her to know that she has modeled standing firm with dignity and respect. She doesn't back down. She takes a courageous stance at every turn, and she's taught a lot of us how to do that as well.
Beautifully said. And Nick, I'll give you 30 seconds. What would you say to Dr. Blackstock?
Well, she's become a friend over the years, right? Which is, again, awe-inspiring, where we have these leaders. And I think Dr. Blackstock, or Cindy, is somebody who's able to do all this work again and still have a sense of humor, have a smile, and always ensure that everyone around her is comfortable. And you always wonder if she's okay, like if she's taking care of herself. But I think it's that mentality of we have to do more for everyone else. And I try to embody that at Beechwood with doing as much as I do at Beechwood again.
It's beautiful. Beautifully said. Thank you both for joining me. I appreciate it very much. Learn more about Beechwood Cemetery, and of course, spend some time on the day of National Truth and Reconciliation, reflecting on what you've learned today and your own journey. Thanks so much for joining us for An Hour to Give.
Connect with us by visiting our website or email us at comments@rogerstv.com.
You're watching an interesting local show on Rogers TV and you want to know more. That's when you head to rogerstv.com. Our website provides more information about our programs, our hosts, our schedule, and about how you too can get involved with Rogers TV. Visit us online at rogerstv.com.
Join us Monday to Friday on Daytime Ottawa as we showcase some of the fabulous things that are happening in your city. We'll showcase some local businesses. We'll also have a little bit of fun with food and fashion. We'll talk a little health and wellness, and we'll share some of those inspirational stories of some of those local people that are doing absolutely